What's up, you guys? Welcome back into iHeartRadio's official wrestling podcast. It is the Battleground Podcast, and today is a very, very special guest. I mean, this is a guy that we have been trying to get on forever. Anytime Impact sends us a list of people, the first one on the top of the list is always Alex Shelley on the list. Alex Shelley on the list. And we always get told he's too busy for you peasants. He doesn't want to talk to you guys. But now we finally have him on the show. We can retire and we can end the show now. Alex, how you doing, sir?
I'm happy I can make your guys' dreams come true. I didn't know it was that difficult to get me on the show.
It was. Every time I would send in a request, I would say, hey, we really like to talk to Alex. And it was always the same thing. Well, you know, he has a job outside of wrestling and he only has a small time frame. And every time we would line it up, they were like, nope, he's not going to talk to you.
That's
guys.
True. I was working 40 hours a week and I would work 4 10s. It would usually turn into like 11, sometimes 11 and a half. So up until maybe 4 months ago, I had like, I don't know, an hour and a half a day. So yeah, interviews were not
And then your line of work coming out of COVID was just a nightmare. So we just kind of like, all right, we'll quit asking for a while. So yeah.
And then, you know, I do a lot of independence too. So I'm on the road on the weekends. And oftentimes that spills into like Fridays and Mondays too.
Oof, jeez.
Yeah, that's okay.
But
life of a world champion.
Yeah, not complaining.
Staying busy is not too bad. So let's kind of talk about this real quick. I mean, you've cut your teeth in promotions such as Ring of Honor, New Japan, and of course, TNA and Impact throughout your career. With all your tag team success, did it ever feel like the Impact World title was unobtainable goal? Was an unattainable goal?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, especially if you go back like, 10 plus years ago when the tag team gold felt like it was out of our hands. It was just something that I never really considered myself being a contender for, let alone champion. That changed, of course, as wrestling does, or as life does, really. Especially the last few years where I had a good amount of single success, especially when I came back after I got my vaccination from COVID and I could work freely again in the pro wrestling world. And I acquired quite a few regional championships. Then it seemed like, okay, I could do this. I could definitely be a world champion in Impact or anywhere.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, you've had a few tenures with the TNA Impact banner. What do you think has been the biggest difference on this current run, which has led you to the world title compared to maybe previous times in your company?
The product's different. I think we can all agree on it. You guys
big time.
Now, to me, there's more of an emphasis on being an excellent pro wrestler inside the ropes. I think in-ring has a very gritty, very hard-hitting, very strong wrestling product. And I think that's what it's turned into. So you have these matches where guys work really hard, and girls as well, ladies, sorry. Everybody gets a lot of time as well. Right? These matches go for copious amounts of time. Josh Alexander and Eddie Edwards went an hour. Speedball and Josh Alexander went about an hour too. Like these guys are really killing it for marathonal durations. I think the way then to get ahead in Impact would be able to show that you can do that. And I had a body of work when I returned into the company in March of 2022 that showed I was doing that. And I was given opportunities and chances in the past year-ish to do the same thing during Impact shows. And I killed it every time. So ultimately, if you can understand what the rules of the game are, and every company's different, every company's got different priorities and different things that they want to accent, then you can understand what you have to do. And if you can do that well, of course, you're going to be somebody who's going to get put in those positions more often. I think that was my case.
Yeah. Excellent answer. That's awesome. Yeah.
And I mean, it shows that, I mean, you've put in the time, you put in the work, like we've talked with me and Eli, and watching you become the champion. I know that's a great thing, because when you think of people that carry that Impact flag, there's Alex Shelley, there's Sabin, there's Eddie Edwards, there's Sami Callihan. And for Impact to come to you and say, this is yours, it's now yours. How did that feel when they told you this is what's going to happen after that night you won the title?
Surreal, but not as surreal as you might think. And the reason was because I had such a demanding schedule for so long beforehand, but I also had a premeditated, demanding schedule after too. So you literally just don't take your foot off the gas. Like there's no moment to sit there and just kind of revel in it for too long. You can appreciate it, or I could appreciate it. And certainly it's a special occasion, but at the same time, it's like, okay, what's next? And I think that speaks to my personality. I'm a bit of an A-type in the regard of, okay, I've done this. What can I possibly move on to next? Like, how can I keep getting better? What can I learn? And okay, now I'm a champion. What do I do with this? Like, how do I make this, or do I do anything differently at all? And in this case, no, I don't. I just continue to do my best because that's working.
Right. Mm-hmm. And I think going back to your previous point, good is not good enough anymore for in ring performance. And I think you see that consistently on Impact. I mean, it's great or better wrestling on a consistent basis. So
yeah.
Absolutely. So, this weekend there's a big event happening at the 2300 Arena in Philadelphia. Impact New Japan's Multiverse United 2, for whom the bell tolls. Few tickets still available, and of course, the show will also air on Fight TV. The main event will see you defending your Impact World Championship against the Ace, Tanahashi. Having been a champion in New Japan previously, what does this match mean to you? And what would you say are your keys to victory in this matchup?
I'll give you guys a little bit of a history lesson. But when I joined New Japan under contract, I was there for 3 years, from 2012 to 2015. And within that time frame, New Japan business went like up, right? So that was in large part due to Tana. And I spent a lot of time with him, as you do when you tour Japan. It's not like it is in the States. You're around the rest of the roster. And I saw how he presented himself in the ring, but also more importantly, how he was a champion outside the ring too. And there's a million things I could say about the man that would attest to that. But he was somebody who really showed me, like, if you want to be on top, then, and this was leading by example, here's the work ethic. Here's what you have to do. And here's how you continue to maintain this. He did it all 3 years I was there. And I'd be lying if I said that I didn't sit there and just watch him on the apron, because I teamed with him so many times and just kind of like put things in the back of my mind. Oh, this is how he moves, or this is what he does here, or this makes the most sense for him to use at this point in the match. So to me, having him as an opponent for the Impact World Championship, that's more surreal than winning the belt in a lot of cases. Because if you had told, if you had told me during the pandemic, like, hey, you just came off of doing the Dusty Tag Cup with Kushida, and you don't know this, but 3 years from now, you're going to be Impact World Champion wrestling Hiroshi Tanahashi at a New Japan Impact joint show at the ECW Arena, I'd say, get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, absolutely right.
Yeah, so this is like really, really cool for me, because Tana's just somebody I respect and care for so much. And he's a genius. And it's one of those things where he's a surefire Hall of Famer, right? Like, surefire Hall of Famer. And when the history books are written, like 20 years from now, you're going to realize how much more of an imprint that he had on pro wrestling than you could possibly realize now, because people are going to come forward with their stories, and you're going to understand how great of a man he was. So to be able to touch greatness, that's really cool.
Yeah, that's going to be a special match, kind of almost a tribute to him because of y'all's past relationship stuff. That's awesome. Speaking of which, we just kind of like to throw this out here. If you wanted to, maybe give us give some flowers to Scott D'Amore. I know he trained you or helped with your training, and he's a very big driving force behind Impact. Maybe say a couple things about him, your relationship with Scott.
Oh man, so Scott, he stopped wrestling in his late 20s mostly.
Yeah.
He had some concussion issues and neck issues, but he was somebody who, in the Metro Detroit wrestling scene in the early 2000s and the mid-aughts, just kept it alive. And he helped so many people in ways that were like far beyond pro wrestling. And I don't know if it's my place to say, they're kind of like his stories to tell, but like, I'll give you a hypothetical example, but if somebody needed, say, $15,000 to step away from wrestling and go to college and gain an education, maybe he would have just given them that money. Things like right? Like real humanitarian things. On top of that, though, Scott's kind of this living link to the previous generations of wrestling. And I think it's a link that's like very, very valuable now because it's gone for a lot of the people now. So if you're a wrestler who's in their teenage years now, or even in their 20s, you probably didn't get to wrestle any of these legends from the 80s or 90s, whereas Scott did. And Scott still gets in the ring and trains at the Can-Am Wrestling School, which is going to become the Impact Wrestling School in the fall. And his advice and perspective on wrestling is something that's sorely missed. And we don't have too many people like that aren't under a contract with WWE as a coach or producer, or maybe under an AEW contract as a producer as well, that you can actually get in a ring and experience pro wrestling with, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool seeing people come up to the school, because I go up there to help out every once in a while, and kind of see Scott talk to them the same way he talked to me when I was 18 years old. And their eyes open, because it's like, oh yeah, this makes so much sense, or this is so logical, or I never thought of it that way. And to have that perspective, especially now, is just so massive, because really every year wrestling gets more athletic and the athletes get better. But there's certain elements of pro wrestling that make it pro wrestling that tend to get lost a little bit with each passing year. And it's nice to have people around who still remember what those are and can infuse them into the current generation.
Yeah, absolutely. And, going back to, talking about the Multiverse United 2, From Whom the Bell Tolls, it's happening this week. And there's some interesting matches on the card. Moose and Eddie Edwards, who have a very jagged history together. They're taking on Zack Sabre Jr. and Shane Hayes from TMDK. What other matches are you looking forward to the most this weekend, other than yours, of course?
Yeah,
sure. So my personal favorites in Impact, like, I do have a bias there. Like, obviously, Shelley, say the last interview I did, said something about Shelley versus Kushida. That's still fresh on my mind. But
yeah,
my personal favorites are going to be Saban and Kushida every time, right? Outside of that, though, I really love watching Josh Alexander, and I love watching Gresham and Speedball. To see Speedball step in the ring, I think he's got, is it a tag or a four-way?
I think it's not a scramble. I think it's the four-way that he's in.
Four-way, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Who else is in that?
Leo Rush and Trey Miguel against Takahashi and Mike Bailey.
That's it. I knew it was something with Hiromu, right? So Hiromu is somebody who I saw when he was in the dojo, right? Like I saw Hiromu Young Lion for so long. So to see anything interactive with Hiromu and Speedball, to me, is like a real treat. I'm super excited. And then for me to see Desperado in any match, like El Desperado and I are really, really, really good friends and training partners from when we lived together in the dojo too. So to see him interact with anybody that's more of a North American native, I love that, right? Like, it'll be interesting to see how he wrestles with Frankie Kazarian, who I'm sure he's never touched before. But I think one match that kind of caught my eye too was Sami Callihan's against Douki.
Yeah.
And that's interesting to me, because like Douki's like an aberrant. Like, this is a guy who was Japanese in Mexico, and that's not that abnormal, but he was good enough that New Japan ended up picking him up. And it's like, oh wow, that's pretty cool, man. Like, you have to be pretty good. But Sami Callihan's not that type of wrestler, right? So
he's crazy.
Yeah, all these Lucha Libre Classica techniques, but you're not going to be able to necessarily use them against Sami Callihan, who's like kind of just smash you in the face and pile drive you type, right? So I thought that match was really cool as well.
Yeah, I think that just the potentials for all this is just can go so many different directions.
Cool looking show.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so this I'm sure as part of the Guns, you guys get asked questions about tag teams all the time. Last year we got a taste of the Guns versus FTR in a 6-man tag. It was incredible, obviously. Would you and Saban be open to almost kind of like a world tour, so to speak, with tag teams, either to go after some you've never faced or some you haven't faced in a long time, like say the Young Bucks? I know as recently as last month, Matt Hardy was saying he would love a Motor City Machine Guns versus Hardy Boys match.
Oh, I mean, sure. Like, anytime I can be in a Time Splitters match or a Machine Guns match or a Time Machine match, that's a treat, right?
Yeah.
But with the schedule as it is right now, and Impact kind of spreading its wings and branching out, because we have the UK tour coming up as well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think there's going to be more international shows coming forth in the next year. It's just a matter of kind of finding the time to do it. But God, I miss wrestling Nick and Matt so much.
Yeah. When was the last time y'all fought? Was it 2012, or did y'all recently than that?
Them for years, right? Because they came to New Japan, and then it was like right where Machine Guns Young Bucks ended, Time Splitters Young Bucks picked up, right?
That's right. Yeah.
I was with those guys, like I was married to them for ages, and then there were a lot of 6-man, so it was Kenny and them against me, Kushida, and usually a third partner. But I miss wrestling them. They were my favorite tag team to wrestle, I think. When it's all said and done, like the chemistry there, just in the history as well. You know, we've wrestled so many great teams, and I almost feel bad saying that, because, like, gosh, you know, we wrestled Apollo Go-Go, we wrestled Forever Hooligans, we wrestled Beretta and Rocky, we wrestled Red Dragon, like so many teams. But the Bucks, at one point, I remember in 2016, I think, they called me their best opponent. And I was really taken by that. But I think it's true. Like, our chemistry, you know, it was just awesome. Great to wrestle them. Machine Guns were supposed to wrestle Matt and Jeff once. That didn't happen, but that was so long ago. I think I broke my collarbone. That was the reason there. And then back a few months later, it was like they were gone. FTR, of course, like, I'd love to wrestle those guys just because they kind of think in a different way, but a similar way. Jim Cornette helped basically finesse the Machine Guns, or kind of finish us off, and I think they probably appreciate a lot of the things we learned from them. So there's so many great teams out there, but just a matter of finding the time to do it, right?
Absolutely. Right. And you know, we don't want to take up too much of your time. I know you're a busy man, being the champ and all, and you got to get ready for your big matches this weekend for everything. Real quick before we let you go, is there anything you want to tell everybody that's watching, listening to this right now before we hop off here?
Oh, no, thank you for all your support, and thanks for listening to this.